مساء الخير، أهلا وسهلا فيكم أصحاب المعالي، أصحاب السعادة، حضرات الحضور، محبي الموسيقى بلبنان. مرة جديدة اليوم مع البيانيست والموسيقي المقيم في لبنان، مقيم للأوركسترا الوطنية، يعني artist in residence مش عم تسمعوا؟ علي الصوت لكن إذا ممكن. مرة جديدة بنجتمع مع البيانيست العظيم كريم سعيد، اللي هو الفنان المقيم للأوركسترا في الهارمونية الوطنية اللبنانية وللكونسرفاتوار artist in residence. مش عم تسمعوا بعدكم كأنه. شو بدنا نعمل؟ طيب بهالجمالية لسلسلة الكونسرتس اللي عم يعطيهم إن كان مع الفيلهارمونيك أوركسترا ولا سلسلة المحاضرات اللي عم تنعطى بالكونسرفاتوار للتلاميذ وللأساتذة، أو هالنمط اللي هي مغاير واللي إن شاء الله حيكتر من خلال جمع اللكتشر الموسيقية مع الكونسرت. هيدا يعني برسبكتيف حنحب ناخده ونطوره بالفترات الماضية، وبارل لهيدا الشيء كمان حيكون في لايف سيشنز ميوزك ابريشيشن، يعني الأوركسترا بتكون موجودة وبيكون في شرح الموسيقي عم يشرح كيف التوزيع بيصير، كيف كل لاين من اللاين تبعون سكورز لحاله كيف بيطلع، وكيف ببلش ينجمع ليتشكل البناء الكامل لسكور اللي بيكتبه المؤلف الموسيقي. بهالشكل بيصير في عنا نوع من اناليسز او تشريح للعمل الموسيقي، وبنقرب اكثر كمستمعين عم نستمع يمكن لموسيقى مش جزء من موروثنا اللي متعودين نشرحه، خلينا نقول، لأنه حتى لو منتذوق الموسيقى يمكن صار الوقت لنقدر نعرف كيف بتصير عملية التأليف، شو هو كل لاين، كيف تنجم مع الهارموني، مع البوليفوني، مع الكونتر بوينت، مع الأوركستريشن، شو هي الانسترومنتيشن لكل آلة، وكيف هذا كله والرذم المخفي، كيف هذا كله بيطلع بالآخر بتركيبة بناء كامل متكامل بيصير تأليف موسيقي. هاي بالفترات القادمة حتكون إن شاء الله نوع من ميوزك أبريشيشن. اليوم مايسترو كريم حب إنه ياخدنا برحلة زمنية. عادة يمكن كثير قليل ما نحن بلبنان عم نسمع contemporary music أو موسيقى حديثة، خلينا نقول من الحداثة للمعاصر للبوست مودرن، هذا كثير قليل ما عم بيصير. استمتعنا مع البيانست الإيطالي الأسبوع الماضي وأعطانا مقطوعات من التأليف الحديث. اليوم الرحلة مع كريم رح تكون الرينيسانس وشامبرغ، يعني هالعالمين اللي يخيل لنا إنه هن بعاد، ولكن مع إنهم على أطراف الزمن اللي إحنا بنعرفه هلا القريب مننا بالكرونولوجي الموسيقية، ولكن في تقاطعات فينا نلاقيها كمان. أنا بحس في شبه مع كل الاختلاف، في شبه. طبعا لجانب هيدا الكونسرفاتوار الشهر الماضي عمل أكثر من 30 محاضرة، 30 ماستر كلاس مع موسيقيين عالميين اجوا على لبنان، أعطوا وأغنوا التلاميذ بالكونسرفاتوار لنعمل هيدا النقلة. عم قول هيك عدا عن بس هالأسبوعين 3 بيانست عظيمين أعطوا ماستر كلاسز وعم يعملوا نقلة. عم بذكر هذا الشيء لأقول إنه كمان في رحلة عم تروح مع الكونسرفاتوار مع كريم سعيد بالمحاضرات اللي عم يعطيها، يلي تراكمها من السنة الماضية للسنة بلش يبين ثمره، لأنه كمان لما تلتقي مع كريم نرجع نلتقي مع إيفلين أو نرجع بيريزوفسكي يرجع يلتقوا مع بروسادا، عم ياخدوا عم يفتحوا آفاقهم لسكولز متنوعة وأبروتشز متنوعة بالتكنيك وبالانتربريتيشن. والحقيقة إنه مايسترو سعيد حتشوفوه اليوم قد ايه هو بيبحث بقلب بيفوت بالتفاصيل، بيطلع المخبى، ان كان لما بيكون عم بيقود الاوركسترا كيف يمرن اللايرز للموسيقيين، او لما بيكون عم بيتعاطى مع التلاميذ بحط لهم مثلا اذا حط برامز او بيتهوفن او شوبان لنفس الجمله الموسيقيه اقتراحات عديده لشو بده المؤلف وكيف تتنفذ وتكنيكلي كيف تتخطى بالصعوبات لتقدر تطلع اللاين او الفريزنج الموسيقيه. هذا موضوع كتير مهم انه نقدر نبلش نفوت بالتراديشن الموسيقي للعزف، تراديشن الحقبه الموسيقيه، تراديشن المؤلف الموسيقي، ولكن من ابعاد تاخذ هالقدرات اللي عندنا بالكونسرفاتوار اللي عم ياخذوا هلا جوائز بالعالم، بس نفتح لهم المجالات لأفق واسعة. إن شاء الله اليوم تستمتعوا بهالأبروتش اللي هو علمي حيكون للموسيقى، واللي رح ينعمل من خلاله كمان ديمونستريشن حية على من خلال الكونسرت رح يعطيه. أنا بدي أتشكر كريم سعيد لكل شيء عم يعطيه من قلبه للبنان. هو لبناني صحيح إنه أردني وبريطاني، لكن هو لبناني كمان، حامل الجنسية اللبنانية اللي نحن بعتبر انه عم نتمسك فيه انه يبقى بلبنان، وفخورين فيه انه صار ريزيدنت عنا للكونسرفاتوار، واللي حنجرب قد ما فينا ننهل من معرفته لصالح البلد. شكرا كريم سعيد، تفضل.
مساء الخير. اولا شكرا دكتوره على المقدمه وعلى الاستقبال. الشرف لي اني اكون هون، والبروجكت اللي عم نعمله بالكونسرفاتوار كثير مهم لي انه يكون متواصل، والشغل دائما مع الطلاب هون. انا بتعلم بس اعلمهم، لانه جايين باسئله، جايين بافكار، جايين باقتراحات. فالجو بالكونسرفاتوار بلاقيه مش اتس نوت نورمال، يعني عاده التلاميذ عم بيستنوا ليخلص الدرس، بس عم بشوف انه هون في kind of a very very healthy interest in music والاشياء اللي عم تحكي عنه. رح اخلط انجليزي وعربي، بس اكثر بالانجليزي لنوصل للجميع. رح احكي شوي عن البروجرام. It is a lecture-recital. But I don't like to think of this as a lecture. I like to think of it as me sharing some thoughts about this very unusual program. So أنا حاطط عندي هون أول point: set expectations. ما بعرف إذا في حدا هون يعني very familiar مع الموسيقى تبعت شينبرغ. ما بعرف إذا في ناس very familiar مع الموسيقى تبعت شينبرغ. بس great. في واحد at least. So I should just say that if you were coming to this concert and you didn't see the program and you were expecting something like this, you might be disappointed. It's not what we're doing here tonight. Although I have nothing against Chopin. I play a lot of Chopin. But this is a very, very special program. The main thing in this program is the distinction between active and passive listening. That's very important for all of classical music, in my opinion. But especially in a program like this, we are inundated with music constantly. You can't go into a restaurant without hearing it. You can't enter a lift without hearing it, enter a car, enter an Uber, anything. It's always there. Which is a problem for us classical musicians, because we want their full attention, because it's so much more fun when you have that. Certain programs demand that attention. If you go to a Mozart opera, you don't need to be demanded. It's so beautiful, and it speaks to everyone. It speaks to the masses. Or Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, or on any of these great works. But with other music, especially modern music, it needs your active listening. And I just want to check that if you don't have programs on your phones downloaded, it's probably a good idea to try and find them before I start playing, because it'll be very helpful to follow the program while I'm playing. Another small disclaimer is that this lecture that I'm going to give now is not that detailed. So there's a lot to be said about this music by people who are a lot cleverer than I am, who have lots of PhDs and teach at universities. And so I'm not that. I'm not an academic. However, I feel that academic music is very attractive to me as an artist, and I want to share with you what it is about this music that captures my attention, my active listening. It's also not very theoretical. The theory behind how Schoenberg selected notes is something for a full lecture at the university. I am going to touch on it very, very briefly, but it's worth saying that the composers of the Second Viennese School, which Arnold Schoenberg was at the head of, did not want listeners to be too interested in how they selected notes. They were looking for something else. They were looking for the listener's experience of pure expressionist emotion, which is not the same as the romantic, Brahmsian, Wagnerian emotions that you get, especially in a Wagner opera. After 5 or 6 hours, you get the climax. It's all about music in this moment, how I am feeling, which was very, very typical of musicians, artists, and so on at the beginning of the 20th century, around the First World War, which is when all of this started. So that is the modern part of my recital. The other part is the Renaissance. What brings these two people together? Well, actually not much, but I was doing a bit of reading and I came across the academic Joseph Kerman, who compared William Byrd, the great English Renaissance composer, mostly wrote church music, but also some instrumental music, with Arnold Schoenberg, because they both had somewhat of a cult personality. They had followers around them, students, who were dictating everything that they said. And in many ways, their personalities or their personas were as important as their music. And they both aimed to change music. It's very important to remember that, for example, Mozart or Bach did not aim to change musical history. Beethoven did. Mozart perfected existing forms, but they were already there. Same with Bach, the field was already there. He perfected it like no one else did, but he didn't aim to change musical history. These people did. And it is a very different listening experience when you have someone with that sort of mission. And the final thing in my small introduction is to say that you don't have to like it. It's important to say this. Actually, Schoenberg himself, the one time when the audience liked his music, he turned his back to them, didn't bow, because he had been attacked his whole life. Then finally he wrote something that they liked. He just said, actually, I'm sort of used to you not liking me. I don't want this. I don't want the praise. Because what this music does for me is highlights the fact that you can hate it. If you hate this music, if you leave this recital, you come up to me and say, I really hated it, I would feel like I am doing Schoenberg justice, because what he wanted is emotion. The enemy is neutrality. What would devastate me is if you left this recital saying, okay, didn't get it. That would be devastating. But if you came to me and said, please, I never want to see you again, I hate this, I would have done my job. Because it takes a lot for music to cause that reaction in someone. It takes a lot. It's also here to, you might love it, by the way, that's another option. And it might also challenge your imagination. You might not feel anything in particular throughout the phrases that I'm playing, but you might find yourself drifting off into a world of your own thoughts, of memories, of certain moments in your life where this music resonates. That's what it's intended for. Finally, there's a small program change for you, for those who have the program. I simply forgot to send it in the email. So I'm going to be playing 2 more movements of Schoenberg after the intermezzo. So after the intermezzo, there's going to be a minuet and trio. So a little bit about, we'll go into a little bit more detail now. I've called the recital legacy because I've always been fascinated by the ways in which composers influence each other, whether it's across generations or through the master-pupil relationships that they often cultivate. So today's recital is about masters and pupils. The two masters are William Byrd and Arnold Schoenberg, and their students. In this program, I chose a selection of keyboard music. I'm using the term keyboard music, not piano music, because a lot of the music that I'm going to play was not written for this instrument. I'll show you in a bit. It was written for the harpsichord, the instruments in the harpsichord family. There's a debate, of course, of whether you should play harpsichord music on the piano or not. The way that the strings are approached is completely different. I would have thought that William Byrd and all his students would love the modern piano because they had several keyboard instruments at their disposal, and it was a very creative time for instruments. People were inventing new instruments and adding pedals and adding manuals to organs, to all sorts of. They had 5 or 6 different virginals, as they called them, which were all part of the harpsichord family. So for me, this is just another keyboard instrument that they would have used, and I have no issues using it. And there's something else. There's another advantage to this music, to this instrument when playing this music. It's the link to string instruments, the ability to sustain, because as you'll see in a minute, the harpsichord sound dies very, very quickly. And my entry into this music, the Renaissance music, was through the group Phantasm, led by Dr. Lawrence Dreyfus, and I recommend that you look him up after this if you like the music. They play on viol consorts. These are the ancestors of the violins and the violas and the cellos. They're all played this way. And my entrance into the Second Viennese School was at the age of 19 when I started playing the Alban Berg Chamber Concerto with Daniel Barenboim on tour. So, when we're talking about Renaissance and modern, I'm just going to remind you of the eras. It's important also to remember that these dates were written by music academics. So Bach didn't wake up one day and say, I'm a Baroque composer. This was all decided much after all these composers died. But we're roughly looking at the 2 periods in red. The Renaissance, about 1400 to 1600, and the modern, which is about 1890 till 1975. Anything written after 1975 is considered contemporary because it's within living memory for many people. A little bit about the Renaissance. In the 15th and 16th centuries, there was a lot of change in European culture, art and music and literature. The term Renaissance means rebirth, of course, as you know, which was coined by the Histoire de France by Jules Michelet. And it's sort of implied that there was stagnation in the medieval era before, so suddenly there's an explosion of creativity. What's very important for us today is that this is when instrumental music starts to become more important. Because in the medieval era, basically the only music you could hear was church music and probably folk music as well, which we don't have a record of. We have a record of all the church music. But it's the first time that people want to play instruments without accompanying a singer or a choir. And that's important for us today, because all of the music I'm playing tonight is purely secular. And this means that many new genres were coming up. For example, the Fantasia, which I'm ending the concert with, which is an improvisatory form that has a very, very loose structure, and many composers would actually improvise while playing it. So this is the harpsichord, which all the Renaissance music would have been written for. I'm playing tonight. Famous Goldberg variations by Bach. Okay, you can see right there that the strings are being plucked. Sorry. Yeah. See, these are strings, they're being plucked. Okay, on the piano, strings are hit by a hammer. So this is the difference. The keyboard is, of course, the same. I'm just going to show you another version of the harpsichord. These are all within the same family of instruments. This is a tiny, tiny, tiny keyboard, but this is a spinet. Okay? Very convenient for travel in those days if you're on a coach or something. So it's a very different sound. So in many ways, everything I'm doing tonight in the Renaissance is an arrangement for a model instrument. So William Byrd has an output of over 470 works. And he basically wrote in every style of his day, mainly sacred choral music in both Latin and English. And of course, this was a huge issue in his day, whether it should be Latin or English, because it was around the time of the Reformation and the changing from Catholicism to the Protestant Church in England, at least. He was a very strong Catholic. They called them recusants in Protestant England. So this was actually dangerous, and many of his followers and supporters actually lost their lives, beheaded, tortured, all of these lovely things that used to happen. But he used to write Catholic masses in secret. So the term singing in secret is very much associated with William Byrd. But he managed to escape persecution himself because he was very close to Queen Elizabeth I. So one of his most important students was Thomas Morley. You're going to hear some of his music today. What's interesting about Byrd and Schoenberg is they taught a lot of theory, but they didn't write down their own theories. Other people did for them. Schoenberg only wrote about harmonic music, tonal music. But this is really interesting that this is the beginning of a theory book from the 16th century, and it's called A Plain and Easy Introduction to Practical Music. The consideration of this hath moved me to publish these labors of mine under your name, both to signify unto the world my thankful mind, and also to notify unto yourself in some sort the entire love and unfeigned affection which I bear unto you. If you have seen theory books today, you wouldn't associate that sort of emotional writing with theory. It just shows how important music was to them in those days and how important this relationship was. This is a dedication to William Byrd. It's a very beautiful dedication, but you would never think that this is actually a theory book. The book is actually written in prose, so it's written as a play between teacher and student. A lot of this music is modal rather than tonal. So this is one of the first things that Schoenberg and Byrd have in common. They're both not using functional harmony. So these are the main 8 church modes, which, I don't want to go into this too much, but basically on the piano, if you use all the white keys, starting on each note, you get a different mode. All I can say is that this is also very similar to the way that the Arabic maqams are used, and a lot of the ways that 16th century composers used these modes is not different, not that different to how Arabic music is written. But the point is they didn't have the concept of major or minor in those days. They had several modes that they could use, and they also mixed modes together. So for example, I'll play a little bit from William Byrd's Fantasia. Has a C sharp, and then the left hand has a C. I'll play it slowly. Okay. This is actually used in film music a lot. Hans Zimmer loves that sort of thing. It's very unclassical and very un-Baroque. You also, when I'll play it, you'll find that actually my right hand is in 3 time, my left hand is in 4 time. This is very similar to Arabic music. It's polyrhythmic. He got that from the medieval era. So just a little bit of nerdiness for those who are interested. But to then go on to tonal music, major and minor are the 2 main scales that we use today, but they're actually 2 modes that were an extension of the 8 church modes that you saw. So Ionian is actually the major, which would be C major, if I started on C, and Aeolian would be minor, which would be A minor if I started on A. Tonal music is based on hierarchy. So if we are in C major, if we do the Ionian on C, C is the most important note. The next important note is G, which is the dominant. There's a sense of coming home, always. And this is true to all pop music. This is true to all romantic classical music. It's true to all classical music, to Baroque music. It's based on this idea that you start somewhere, you go to different keys, but you have to come home. So there's hierarchy. And the most important three chords in any scale are chords 1, 4, and 5. Okay, so you get something called a cadence at the end of most phrases in tonal music. Okay, we've all heard that before. So, this is not going to be there tonight. This is why a lot of people might find my program challenging, because we have been so conditioned to this, largely because of pop music. Most of the music you'll hear is based on this formula. But it's based on hierarchy. So if you remove the hierarchy, what happens? If you said all notes are equal, like Schoenberg did, there's no home. You're not coming back anywhere. Every moment is its own home. And then with the modal music, the home can change every phrase, simply because they hadn't established this way of writing in the Renaissance. So this tonal language is something that brings them together. There's also the element of dance, which is very, very important. I'm going to start the recital with a dance, a volta. And I thought this is from the film Elizabeth, just to give you an idea of the sort of dance that this piece would have been written for. Doesn't mean people would have been dancing to it, but it's supposed to remind you of this dance. So just to give you an idea, of course this is Hollywood, but yeah. Oh, sorry.
Play a volta!
So this music is supposed to remind you of that, and that this is the scene that would have been normal to all these composers. Now we move on to the 20th century. Finally, the slide that I keep showing you by mistake is this. This is a work of art. It's a urinal. This is by Marcel Duchamp. It's the fountain created in 1917. Okay? It's supposed to shock. Why is this art? This is the question that he intended people to ask themselves. You cannot listen to Schoenberg's music without that sort of open mind. Why should this be art? What do you see in it? What is the artist trying to tell you? What is the artist trying to make you feel? Why is it worth millions? So I just wanted to, I'm not an art analyst, but I needed to show that, and also Schoenberg's own art. Sorry, something's stuck here. Yeah. 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 Also, this is The Scream by Edvard Munch in 1893. So the emotion that you see in that painting is very much the emotion that Schoenberg wants you to feel in his music, and he was himself a painter. I don't know whether it says something about him, but most of his paintings are actually self-portraits. But they're all distorted. They're all distorted, and distorted. I would say they're distorted emotions. So we'll go back to Schoenberg. A few quotations from Schoenberg. If it is art, it is not for all. And if it is for all, it is not art. So that's one thing he said. Another thing, in defense of his own music, he said, once they have got to know my tunes, they will want to whistle them in the street. Well, that's not happening. But he believed that it will. And he was looking for freedom from all forms of cohesion and logic. So he once said to the great pianist Busoni, my music must be brief, concise, in 2 notes, not built, but expressed. So if I play you a little bit of his Opus 19 piece. That's literally, the whole thing is based on just 2 notes. Finally, I'm gone on a bit. I think I would like to just discuss the issue of dissonance, which you will hear a lot of tonight. So, we all know, if you have piano lessons, if you play this, your teacher should stop you and say that's a wrong note. Yeah. Why? Because it's dissonant. It's discord. We're all conditioned not to like that. It's supposed to be something we move away from. Schoenberg used the term emancipation of dissonance as if it was some sort of persecuted minority that needed to be brought back into the mainstream. It's also worth noting that Schoenberg moved to Hollywood in 1934, escaping persecution in Europe, and taught a whole generation of film composers who worked with directors like Alfred Hitchcock. So we're all used to, I'm not showing the whole scene, but those of you familiar with the film Psycho will recognize this music. Yeah, exactly. So it makes sense in a horror film. But what is it that attracts these people to that sort of sound? Is he trying to tell us that beauty is in the eye of the beholder? Do we need to redefine what beauty is? Or is it because he was growing up in Vienna at the same time as Sigmund Freud and very, very interested in psychoanalysis and dreams and talking about, certain topics for the first time in history, and the whole idea of examining your consciousness and your subconscious? Do you get dark things if you look too deep? And are these the sounds that the chaos in your mind, is that what you would hear? And is he trying to make us experience that in our conscious, not in our subconscious? These are all questions that come to mind. But that scene in 1960 was, of course, revolutionary. It wasn't normal to be using dissonance this way. So it was really a statement. We forget that it has to have started somewhere, that sound. It wasn't necessarily for horror films, but Hollywood really used it. So, other than that, I have to say that, again, please tell me if you don't like it at the end of the concert. Please tell me you hated it, or please tell me you loved it, but please don't tell me you got bored. That's the only thing I ask. Please try not to get bored. If you are finding yourself getting bored, use your imagination. Try to think about what the composer was telling you, and thank you very much for coming tonight. intermezzo, followed by the extra minuet and trio by Schoenberg.
كريم على الجرأة أول شيء. It was a bold side of this concert of him as well. لما سألني قال لي شو رأيك بتزبط؟ قلت له إيه بتزبط. هي بدها جرأة أكيد، بس بنقول كمان those who survived this experience with us, congratulations. Thank you very much. It's really very important إنه نحن بلبنان كمان ننفتح على ال 12 tones music، على ال contemporary sound، وصولا لأكثر كمان الاكسبيرمنتال لسه بعد مش يوم هيك بنشوفه سوا. ما معقول نضلنا بس مع كل جمال يعني عملنا 2 concertos بيتهوفن ب1 concert last time مع الأوركسترا، بس كمان ما فينا نسكر دينتنا عن الفلسفة اللي اجت بعد الحرب العالمية واللي عانوا منها الأوروبيين، وحطوا هيدي ال 12 tones اللي بلشها شونبرغ ليروحوا لفلسفة جديدة ومختلفة انطلقت منها الموسيقى. لازم كمان نتعرف على عصرنا نحن شو عم بيصير في موسيقى بالعالم. Thank you very much, really. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
So,